Hello, my name is Julie Robb. I am the Community Relations Representative here at Ida Culverhouse Broadview. Before we get started on today's presentation, I would like to share just a little bit with you on kind of the era living memory care and what's happening here at Ida Culverhouse Broadview. As some of you may have heard that we are expanding on our memory care here at Ida Culverhouse, and we are going to be opening the first floor of the terrace coming up next week. So we've got some really exciting movement happening in the community, and we're really looking forward to having some new residents move into our community.
I don't know why.
If you have any questions about that or the terrace in general, you can contact us here at eraliving.com, and we'd love to tell you more about it. So we are now going to move on to our main event. We're honored to host David Troxel, who will be presenting today's presentation, Strategies for Improving Communication with a Person with Dementia. So I am going to go ahead and pass it over to David.
Well, hello, everybody. Before I start to share my screen, I just wanted to say welcome and thank you for being part of the webinar. I know the number of you have been with me this is number 7 of 7, so I think you should get some kind of special prize, but I do appreciate your attentiveness and desire to learn. Okay, can you all see my screen? I hope you can. I'm seeing some nodding heads. Let me get this up here and running. Very good. Well, greetings again, and in case you see this rather Baroque painting behind me, I'm actually not in Paris, France at the Versailles Mansion estate. I'm actually in Louisville, Kentucky today in a corporate meeting room here for a group I'm working with here in Kentucky. It's raining a lot. I wish we had some of that rain in California, but I'm delighted to be with you, my friends in the Pacific Northwest. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that's really near and dear to my heart, very important, about how we effectively communicate with people who have cognitive loss. And I hope I can, as always, give you a toolkit of things to do and not do, and we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. I think you all know me by now. Many of you have been with me in the series, but I will just say, in case we have some newcomers, that I'm known for the development of something called the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, a series of books about this philosophy of care that's now in use around the world. And I'm so delighted that Era Living has actually formally embraced the Best Friends Approach in their program in the Seattle area to talk about this whole modern view of memory care, about being relationship-based, activity-rich, knowing and using the life stories. So a special shout out and thank you to any of the Era Living staff who are on the call today. Again, together with my colleague, Virginia Bell, we've written a number of different books, and I've had a long career working with the Alzheimer's Association, University of Kentucky Alzheimer's Center, and also been a family care partner for my mom, Dorothy, who passed away in 2008 with Alzheimer's disease after actually living in memory care assisted living for 3 years. So I've kind of seen all sides of this story of dementia. By the way, yesterday was World Alzheimer's Day, September 21, and I have to say it feels good to be part of a worldwide movement to help people live a better life who have Alzheimer's disease. So it's a good week to all be together here on this webinar. So today we're going to kind of keep it simple, and sometimes I have 10 or 12 things on this slide, but we're going to basically talk about dementia and communication, strategies for enhanced communication, and we'll have a little bit of a wrap up and discussion. And I know many of you, again, have been with me for 7 of 7 webinars, my goodness, and sneak peek, we're going to do an 8th in November or December. So if you do have questions about really any aspect of care today, I hope we'll have some time toward the end of the webinar. I've tried to keep this one a little bit simpler, so feel free to ask about anything. This could be Stump the Expert Day, whatever you want to do, and I'll do my best to give you my thoughts on any topic. So let's start off and kind of broadly talk about communication and dementia. Sadly, Alzheimer's disease and other dementia generally cause damage to the communication centers of the brain. And of course, the short-term forgetfulness can make everything worse. So in other words, you have damage with word finding, issues of communication and understanding. But even if someone's doing pretty well and you say to them, Mom, Would you go to the bedroom and bring me your social security card? By the time she gets there, she may have forgotten your instruction and come back with a red hat instead of the social security card. So it's kind of a double whammy, so to speak. The damage to the centers of the brain responsible for communication, along with forgetfulness, make it hard to really connect sometimes with the person with dementia. Now, the Alzheimer's Association has some good materials. I'm a big fan of their website, alz.org. I've also been a big fan during these series. I've mentioned Mayo Clinic having some good information as well. I know University of Washington also has an Alzheimer's Center and is also a great resource for all of you in the Northwest. But the association, I think, has a good handout here where they talk about, really the various elements of loss of communication. And these include difficulty finding the right words, using familiar words repeatedly, kind of repetition, and sometimes even questions, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Or, when is my son picking me up? When is my son picking me up? Describing familiar objects rather than calling them by name. So, maybe someone's, having a coffee cup, or they want to have a cup of coffee. They might say, well, I need that white thing, that holder, that glass, that container, and not know the word coffee cup. Easily losing a train of thought. There's actually a famous book Jonathan Swift wrote called Gulliver's Travels. And people have noted that actually in that book, he has a race of people he describes who live forever, but gradually lose their memories. And Jonathan Swift, in this book written hundreds of years ago, Gulliver's Travels, says that they cannot remember the end of the sentence after they've started from the beginning. Basically, again, this idea of losing your train of thought. Difficulty organizing words logically, kind of this jumbled up language. Reverting to speaking a native tongue. Pardon me. So maybe someone was born in Portugal and they've lived in the US for 50 years, but their first language was Portuguese, and now they're speaking Portuguese. So again, this can be part of kind of that rolling back in cognition, speaking less often and relying on gestures more than speaking. So again, thumbs up, thumbs down, hands, things like this. These are all some of the signs of the communication losses of dementia. Now, I want you to know about something that I sometimes nickname the 3 A's of communication losses. And I don't usually get too technical, but I think these phrases are ones you should know and probably do know already, many of you. But there are certain things that are described by physicians when they're talking about the language losses, because they vary. Aphasia is really a general term for what most people with dementia experience, this sort of comprehensive loss of communication, reading, speaking, or writing. That the person who's having language difficulties is also experiencing aphasia. Apraxia is difficulty performing familiar tasks, even if instructions are understood. It's almost like there's that disconnect between brain and body. So you say to someone, Mom, here, put your arm through the sleeve of your sweater, or let me help you put it on, and their arms remain by their side. They don't really actually follow your directions. That's called apraxia. And then agnosia, the inability to recognize familiar objects. It could also include faces, by the way. So again, they may not recognize that turkey sandwich is actually a sandwich, or that a hat is a hat, or that a book is a book. And they may also have issues with looking at facial recognition. It's interesting, my mom sometimes, when she had Alzheimer's, she would sometimes say to me as we're looking at somebody, maybe in her memory care neighborhood, she would say, is that a man or a woman? She had trouble, again, even differentiating genders. And I think part of that was, many women wear their hair very short nowadays, and so she couldn't really, she was looking for, a piece of jewelry or lipstick or earrings that might, for her, suggest gender. Now, I want you to know about one form of dementia that's a really tough one. I've had several friends who've had this diagnosis, primary progressive aphasia. And this is something that's not all that common, but it does often affect younger people who are sometimes misdiagnosed with this PPA diagnosis. Jane Brody wrote an excellent piece. It's, I think, about 10 or 12 years old now. You can actually still Google Jane Brody, New York Times, primary progressive aphasia. And I noticed it's up on their website. But she describes this disease as the thief that robs the brain of language. And basically, with people with PPA, They begin to have language issues even before they have cognitive decline. They begin to have trouble communicating with others. And eventually, they do get demented. Eventually, they do have that cognitive decline. But there is a sadness of that sort of closing in where they really lose the ability to communicate with the outside world, so to speak. Now, there are some strategies for helping people communicate and do better with PPA. I won't go into them all today, but again, this article and of course a Google search probably will help you with this diagnosis. So now I want to kind of go to probably the part that many of you are thinking about or looking at in terms of this webinar series, and just give you some real strategies that are influenced by the best friends philosophy that Era Living adopts, about sort of some do's and don'ts, kind of a caregiver toolkit around communication. And I can't remember if I showed this slide last time, but I actually just saw this wonderful friend of mine yesterday, or probably Monday this week. Virginia Bell is my longtime writing partner of 30 plus years. We began working together in the 1980s at the University of Kentucky Alzheimer Center. This was taken about a month or two ago, and I just saw her yesterday. She's doing equally well. And Virginia had recently turned 99 years old, and she is still as sharp as ever. And we're actually working on a new book together as we speak. And so I'm sending you her greetings to Kentucky. She's about 70 miles from me here, 70 miles away from me here versus 2,000 when I'm in California. And I want to say I'm in admiration of the many talented people I've met at Era Living. And one of the things that I'm so proud of in terms of my own relationship with Era Living as a consultant is they kind of get this idea of what good contemporary dementia care is all about. And I think the staff there share my values that even when communication skills decline, Era Living believes that the person living with dementia retains a desire to communicate, which I think is very powerful. Again, those of you who've been with me through this series, I think understand that I'm saying, in fact, that people with dementia are just like the rest of us. They have all the same needs, emotions, values, that things that are important to us are important to them, and vice versa. And most of us have a need to be understood, a need to be in relationship with others. Okay. So here we go. David Troxel's cool toolkit for you here in Seattle and via Kentucky and California. Okay. Life story work. In dementia care, as you've learned from this series, people with dementia begin to lose their stories, right? They lose their sense of biography and where they were born and some of their memories. And it's very, very sad. But what can make everything better is that when we become their biographers, in effect, when we learn a lot about them. And again, when we think about true friendship, a lot of the art of communication with our friends is we know them. We know their body language, we know some of their expressions, we can kind of read their face, we can understand their words, we have this certain intimacy. And the staff at Era Living and all of you who are on this call today, I just want to encourage you, it's so important to make sure that anybody caring for your family member knows a lot about them, because the life story can provide a lot of clues and cues and even help us initiate conversation starters. My mother, Dorothy, who a few of you have met, I think, on this webinar series, when I showed her picture. My mother had a very interesting life growing up in Hong Kong, in Montreal, Canada. She spoke fluent French. I'm her only child. She liked to talk about her son. She loved to entertain and loved, English history. And so when you knew these things about her, you can kind of say, Dorothy, what's this I hear that you've always enjoyed reading about Queen Elizabeth and the royal family? Tell me about that. Or what was it like to live in Montreal where the winter is very cold? And tell me more about those winters. And you see, again, when you have these sort of conversation starters based on their life story, often you get a very positive surprise. Mom, tell me about the time you visited Paris, France. Or Dad, what was it like to graduate #1 in your class in medical school? My goodness, that is quite an achievement, So again, make sure you have this sort of life story information. Now, again, just to give you a flavor of what Era Living does, because again, you can do this even at home, devise something simple. Let's say you have an in-home worker coming in, maybe you're going to a new adult day center. Maybe your mother or father has to go to the emergency room. You want to make sure the staff there know some things about them. So Era Living has a whole workbook where they trace people's history, talk about spirituality, religion, preferences, What do you drink in the morning? Do you drink your coffee? How do you take it, right? Because they want their staff to have this kind of worksheet in order to better relate to the residents. But oops, sorry about that. Oh my gosh, I hit the wrong button. David, goodness gracious. Okay, here we go. Let me get back to my right slide. The joys of Zooming these days. Here we go. Okay. All right, but this is what I want you to really focus on, because I'm not really expecting all of you to devise a long history, a long form workbook, but it's this one, which I think is very creative. Again, Era Living's form, you could easily reproduce this at home, or I imagine you could call Era Living, they'd probably send you one of their blanks. But the top 10 things about being a best friend, or top 10 things you should know about someone. So for example, Sue was a labor and delivery nurse. She's an avid gardener, passionate about tulips. She grew up on a farm and loves chickens. She snow skied until she was 81. The family historian, she has more than 50 photo albums and loves looking at them. She hates cats, loves talking about her oldest grandson, Jay, who lives in Toronto. Her favorite color is purple. Her favorite treat is chocolate ice cream, and she volunteered at the Seattle Symphony for 25 years, right? So the goal at assisted living is, if you have something like this for staff, maybe this little card is on their shadow box or on their door. So if I'm going to greet someone in the morning, I can say hello, talk to her about Toronto, Canada, maybe talk to her about the flowers being beautiful and we should go out and see the tulips later in the day. Certainly, if I know this about Sue, even knowing about her nursing career, I can guess she's organized and driven and wants to talk about things that are important. So do one of these for your family member, okay? Do one of these for your family member, because it will really come in handy, again, if you ever need that an ER visit or someone comes into the house. You want them to have a quick and easy way to make a connection, all right? So again, strategies for better communication. One is, this is just a little jumble kind of a slide here with a number of key elements. Again, first, use the life story. And then a couple other points. Check the environment. When you're communicating with a person with dementia, remember that they have a short attention span and they can be easily distracted. So do your best, if you're visiting your mother in memory care, if you're doing something at home, to make sure there's not a lot of extra noise going on, a lot of extraneous music. You want to really capture their attention. I know with my mom, even in the dining room in her memory care neighborhood, I had to finally move her seat, because if she was in an area where there were a lot of people coming and going in her vision, kind of, in her field of vision, she would look at them, look there, look here, look there, and even stop eating. Introduce yourself as needed. Now, this may be a strange one for some of you who are family caregivers versus professionals, but even with my own mother, I would sometimes say, "Hello, Mom, how are you this morning? It's your son, David." I know who you are. Well, maybe she did not. So again, for those of you who are professionals on the call, be sure to introduce yourself when you think it would help. Slow down, speak up. It's okay to give the person time to answer, but eventually provide a clue or cue if needed. Again, many people with dementia, we just have to slow down. I'm kind of a fast talker, so I always have to check myself when I'm working in memory care, but speak up. Sometimes people have poor hearing. And again, if you're saying to some, if you're asking someone a question, don't feel like you have to immediately give them the answer, because sometimes they will get it themselves. And we want to do as much with them instead of always kind of doing things for them to maintain that maximum independence. This fourth bullet is probably one of the most important. I'm guessing any of you who are on this call with your educational experiences know this, but in dementia care, the memory loss is profound. It's real. So try not to argue and correct. It doesn't really matter ultimately if someone's right or wrong or whatever. But if Mom says President Eisenhower is doing a great job, you say, "Mom, I like Ike too," versus, "No, he isn't. He's not in the White House now. It's President Biden." And again, I think part of this is understanding that the brain has been damaged. They're not just being ornery and stubborn, that memory loss is real. Don't ask questions the person may not be able to answer. A friend of mine who I really like, but who's had so many struggles figuring out the do's and don'ts of dementia care, she still occasionally will visit her mother in assisted living and say, "Mom, do you know who I am?" Or, "Mom, do you remember my name?" And of course, I cringe about this, and I always encourage her not to do this. I think she just wants to test her mother's memory. But the problem with this is, you see, if I'm asking someone a question and they're not coming up with the answer, number one, I think it causes frustration. Okay, but when you say to someone, Mom, do you remember my name? You see, it's almost a double blow because in the moment, the person with dementia still knows that they should know, that they should know. So the frustration's there that they can't answer. And then I think it probably leads to a lot of despair and sadness. I mean, they're probably thinking, well, how come I can't remember my own daughter's name? What's wrong with me? And so again, don't do that if you can help it. We're all only human as caregivers. We can't necessarily avoid asking questions altogether. But you want to say, hello, Mom, it's your daughter, Mary Lou, or did you enjoy your breakfast of bacon and eggs this morning? Not what did you have for breakfast? Okay, let's move on and we'll cover a few more kind of key toolkit areas here. Strategies for better communication. Communicate with your heart. I can't stress this enough that, I think people with dementia, as language declines, I think in many ways, they're more sensitive to the mood of the room. They're really sensitive to the interactions of staff, the interactions of family. If the siblings are arguing and quarreling and mother picks that up, it alarms her, it worries her. So I always say, practice the art of emotional communication, offer encouraging words, a warm tone of voice, affection and smiles. With my own mother, I kind of hammed it up. I almost gave my Academy Award-winning performance. Mother, it's your son, David. How are you? Oh my goodness. It's so good to see you. I like to almost call it like the airport reunion scenario, like where you're at the airport, you see families who haven't been together for a while, and they give each other huge hugs, right? That's how I want you to think about some of this communication. Now, again, obviously use your own sensibility and the situation there may be different, but you want to have that warmth. Mom, what would I do without you? It's good to be your friend, a best friend. Comforting, good words like this are very reassuring. And you can use them even if you're not really understanding totally what the person's saying. So again, communicate from your heart, very, very important. Okay, some other kind of important principles and kind of David Troxel's bag of tricks here as we go forward. This has been, I have to say, one of my favorite techniques in memory care. And it means kind of, again, engaging the person and remembering that people are just like the rest of us, people with dementia. So I like to ask for an opinion. When I ask somebody for their opinion, what does that mean? I think it means that you value the person, right? And so even the simplest things, if you say to your mother, Mom, do you like my new shade of lipstick? Or maybe I'll say, Mom, does this color, this blue color look good on me? Okay. So simple things like that can be very, very powerful. I think a few of you have heard this story who were on my previous webinar when I mentioned it. But, when my mother lived in memory care, I would bring in 4 or 5 dress shirts on hangers, 4 or 5 neckties, and say, Mom, you're so good at this. I really need your help. I'm not very good at this. I have a busy week at work. Would you help me match my shirts and ties and help me think about what I should wear this week? Oh, she loved it. And we talk about them. And, one time I had a tie that I got in England years ago. And my mother said to me, oh, darling, my mother had a British accent. Oh, darling, this is a paisley tie. And I'd even forgotten that word, that it was a paisley tie, but my mother remembered it. So think about things like that. And then this third bullet here reminds me to talk to you about this, that, I think it's okay to talk about life with your family member. Mother, or maybe you're a staff member at Era Living, Mrs. Jones, I've got 2 teenagers. I could sure use your help because you had 5 children. What would be a good curfew time for a 16-year-old on a weekend? What kind of allowance should I give my children? Should I have them work in high school or just focus on academics, right? And so I think sometimes you ask questions like this, and again, it can lead to a great discussion. One of my all-time favorites is I was in a memory care building and one of the young caregivers announced she was engaged. And I asked her, this is in front of all these people with dementia, there were 16 residents and other staff. I said, oh my gosh, you're engaged, congratulations. How long have you guys been dating? And she said, 3 months. And there was sort of this gasp in the room that she was engaged after 3 months. And I just turned it around and I began talking to the residents, how long do you think someone should date before they get married? And we ended up having a 45-minute discussion about this topic of dating and marriage, how long you should date before you get married. And I think the consensus was 1 year. There were a few people who said 4 or 5 years. So there you go. Maybe they had a bad experience with their first marriage. But it was very sweet because we actually had a meaningful conversation, humor, wisdom, sharing. And at the end of it, I'll never forget, one woman looked at this young caregiver and said, you know, dear, go for it. I believe in love at first sight. So I thought that was very sweet. So again, asking opinions, okay? Another kind of foundational piece for me, and I do a lot of this with staff training, and any of you who are on the call who are mentors or leaders for assisted living, day centers, in-home agencies, I want you to really remind our staff that it's so important, I think, to give a compliment. You know, the person living with dementia, they've had a lot of losses. They've had to potentially move out of their house, stop driving, give up maybe even a beloved job. They don't have money anymore. Maybe they had to give up their wallets and credit cards because they couldn't manage that, right? So they've been a little downtrodden. Depression, you know, the Alzheimer's Association says that 40% of people with Alzheimer's disease will experience bouts of depression during their course of illness. So we want to do our best to lift them up. And I think a great way is to give them a nice compliment. Dorothy, you look so beautiful today in your pretty pink sweater. You know, Marjorie, I can't believe you won the Nurse of the Year award in King County for 5 years in a row. You are really my hero, you know, things like that. So lots of compliments, okay? And I have to say, and you're welcome to swipe this, any of you who are professionals on this webinar today, when you're doing staff training, I always like to remind the staff that, hey, I know we're all short-staffed these days. The staffing crisis is national. I know it's a tough time to work, but remember, when you do these kinds of things, it helps the resident feel safe, secure, valued, connected, happy. And if your resident is happy and trusts you and connects with you, everything goes better, right? You actually save time, okay? And speaking of time, you know, how much time does a compliment take? Well, maybe 30 seconds. How much money does it cost? It's free, right? And when you give a compliment to somebody with dementia, they might very well give you a compliment back. Hey, I want to roll back to my previous slide because I forgot one little point I want to make about asking for opinions. I will warn you that if you say, Mother, does this color look good on me? They do tell you the truth. So you got to have a good sense of humor, because often they'll say, no, no, it looks terrible. So you got to just roll with it and have that good sense of humor as a caregiver or care partner these days. Okay. Again, keeping with my theme of kind of a toolkit today for communication, I do think it's powerful to give somebody with dementia some simple choices, okay, rather than always just telling them what to do or et cetera, because again, most of us don't like to be managed or overly managed. So offer some simple choices, because I think it does help the person feel more in control, okay? So for example, you might want to say, Joanne, do you want to wear the blue sweater today or the red sweater? Okay, now maybe Joanne always chooses the red sweater. Doesn't matter. The fact you're giving her this simple choice is really helpful. Mom or Mike, do you want the roast beef sandwich today or a tuna fish sandwich? Again, simple choices. Even sometimes in memory care, I've seen nurses say, you know, Mrs. Smith, would you like to have your shower now or after lunch? Versus you need a shower. Would you like to take your medications now or after lunch? Again, helping them feel like they have more of a horse in the race, more that they have more control of things. Okay. This next slide, I want to thank my friends at Openended for letting me use this concept here as part of their team and staff member training. Basically, they say, try 3 times to turn a no into a yes. Okay, try 3 times. And why are we saying this? Well, because it just seems so obvious to me, and I'm sure all of you would agree if we were in the same room together, you'd be nodding your heads, that persons with dementia often say no to everything. They say no to things, even things they maybe would enjoy. Now, there is one exception, ice cream. They always say yes to ice cream. But why does someone say no? Well, I think part of it is we know that apathy comes with this disease, so there's a certain level of apathy. But I think also they may not be fully understanding what you're asking them to do, all right? And you see, again, remember my statement that people with dementia are just like the rest of us? If someone asks me, let's say, to invest in Japanese derivatives, well, I don't know what a Japanese derivative is. And if I'm smart, I'm going to say no, because why would I invest in something that I don't understand. So remember that even when you're saying, mother, would you like to go to the garden? She may not be fully understanding what you're trying to communicate to her. So here's a quick example. Try 3 times to turn that no into a yes. Mom, would you like to go to the garden? No, dear, I don't think so. I'm tired. Mom, the red roses are so nice right now. That's your favorite color and flower. Please come with me. Oh, I don't think so. Now, number 3, Mom, you studied hard. You're a certified master gardener. I could sure use your advice in the garden. And maybe you kind of take your arm and kind of hold on to her arm. Please join me for a while. Oh, okay. Okay. Again, turning the no into a yes. Now, of course, it has to be voluntary. You're not going to drag someone to an event, but this is very important. And for those of you who are professionals or staff members on the call, I think this is really important because I know the other day I was visiting an assisted living building and there were only about 5 people in an activity. And I asked a couple of the staff members, hey, where is everybody? This is so much fun, this music program. Oh, David, I asked them and they said no, right? So remember, don't just give up the first time. I think good memory care is, again, nudging and kind of not coercing, nudging and just kind of cajoling people to, come into the activity, even though we do know they have the right to say no. Okay. A few more kind of key concepts on sort of this idea, again, of a caregiver toolkit. Open-ended questions, okay? Open-ended questions. What is an open-ended question? It's a question that cannot be answered by a yes or a no, okay? Now, again, there's nothing inherently wrong with asking a close-ended questions, did you like your lunch today? Yes, all right. But what happens with a closed-ended question is it just kind of is a conversation stopper, not a conversation starter, right? And so when you want to try to have a longer conversation with your husband, wife, or partner, or mom or dad, brother or sister, whoever it is you're concerned about, when you ask these opening questions like, tell me more about the people in this photograph, or tell me more about this, what did you enjoy most about living in Alaska for 5 years, right? And you see, when you do that, often it kind of opens up the conversation for more free-flowing answers. So think about this as one technique, this idea of kind of open-ended questions. Okay. So we've given you, I think, a few, I hope, helpful ideas for, working with the person with dementia. Again, just to kind of recap that emotional connection. I've used this in another presentation during this series, but I'm always so touched by Maya Angelou's statement, her poetry, her beautiful saying, people will remember, people will forget what you did. I'll get this right. People will forget what you did. People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. So remember, emotional communication, warmth, positive words, using their life story. Mother, tell me about growing up in Montreal. Offering them their favorite cup of tea just the way they like it. Again, compliments, asking opinions, all these things, open-ended questions. But, certainly one challenge is that later stage communication. With all the talk about medicines, we've talked about Aduhelm, this new approved drug, and other drugs during this series. I just wish somehow that they would create a pill that might protect better the communication centers of the brain, because it is so sad we have these losses. So what do you do when someone's in late stage dementia, maybe living in skilled nursing, and they're just not very communicative? Okay, so here are a few ideas, and I think I'm going to do this slightly out of order from this slide. I think number one, let them kind of soak in the communication of nature and Mother Nature. So, if it's a beautiful day, even if you have to get them in a wheelchair, get them outside, be outside, just sit with them, be with them, soak in that natural vitamin D, watch the birds, listen to the sounds of nature, look at flowers. All of that can be really quite terrific. Okay, what else? Affirming words. I've already mentioned a few of this in this presentation, but even if they're not totally understanding you, I love sitting next to someone, maybe in the later stages of dementia, or maybe even someone on hospice, and just kind of holding their hand, the power of touch. It's so nice to be with you today. I'm so happy to be with you today. And what a beautiful day it is. My goodness, I've learned so much from you. Thank you so much. You've really been my mentor, my hero. You're a wonderful dad. I think we never want to assume that nobody's there, right? We always want to talk about them as though they're understanding everything. But even if they're not, I think those affirming words, again, as Maya Angelou wrote, they are picking up your emotion, picking up that emotional connection. Music. Music and song lyrics live in a different part of the brain than words and language. And I think if I can offer you any really major suggestion that is so easy to implement is be sure that there's good music in your family member's life. I know a number of facilities now around the country are putting in these little smart speakers, Alexa and Google speakers in someone's room in memory care. So the staff can go in, and if someone's always loved Dolly Parton, the staff can say, hey, Google, play Dolly Parton, or play Chopin, classical music. So, use these smart speakers or get an old-fashioned CD player, but make sure there's music in their rooms, make sure there's music out there, because it does change mood, it impacts emotion. And I think music, honestly, can even put someone in a very good place or space for personal care. Play someone's favorite music before you get them in the shower, and often that can kind of soften their mood and lessen anxiety. People with dementia, just like the rest of us, right? Well, I know for me, if I'm sort of dragging when I'm working at home, I will sometimes put on my favorite music, and it really lifts my spirits and gives me more energy as well. So music, okay? And if someone is doing kind of garbled speech, I guess one thing I will say is sort of look for that emotion underneath, because sometimes you can see if someone's speaking with some distress in their words, or are they kind of happy or interested in something. So again, try to find that emotion underneath. And sometimes, honestly, I've just even kind of had a humorous approach, like, Bob, I'm not totally sure what you're saying, but I completely agree with you. You are absolutely right. And something like that can get a chuckle, or kind of, give that nice connection, even if you can't quite totally understand where they're coming from. So again, the kind of whole stages of dementia and this idea of communication, so important as someone, works their way through this process. So as I promised, I wanted to make sure I leave some time for some questions and discussion and recap of this 7-part series today. So I'll kind of begin to wind down a little bit. I was looking for a few quotes around communication. And, I have to say this one kind of stood out for me. Stephen Covey, kind of the famous management consultant. In the last analysis, what we are communicates far more eloquently than anything we say or do. Okay. What we are communicates far more eloquently than anything we say or do. So I want to thank all of you for being part of this series, because, I am always touched by Tom Kitwood, this famous researcher's quote, that caregivers are physicians of the human spirit. And what we are is part of this worldwide effort. Here we are, Worldwide Alzheimer's Day. We're part of this worldwide effort to fight stigma, to advocate for services, to build dementia-friendly communities. Every 3 seconds around the world, someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's touched 1 in 3 family. So for those of you who are family members, there's quite a huge community out there. And everything we can do when we're with our family member or for others or people living in community, I think really advances our cause. We know that we still have a lot of work to do around medication and effective medicine for dementia. The treatment for Alzheimer's is socialization, it's engagement, it's activity. I think you and me, we are the treatment for Alzheimer's as we try to create a therapeutic healing environment. Again, kind of recapping our 7-part series here, what now? What do I do? Well, we want to keep the person as healthy as possible, make sure we're identifying pain and depression. And we want to remember that we can't do it all alone. We don't want to wait to seek help. It's very important to use the services of the Alzheimer's Association, make a game plan, and then learn all you can about the various kinds of dementia. Make sure you have a good medical evaluation, have your mom or dad or family member followed by a good neurologist, and all of these things can make a really big difference, okay? So if you are interested in learning more about the Best Friends approach, and again, thank you, Era Living, for embracing my work very formally. I do have several books and some website information. I'm sorry this slide got a little bit distorted, but a book I wrote called A Dignified Life, the Best Friends Approach, and that kind of bottom right, the stack there. It's actually our family edition. It's available on Amazon. I think that Era Living actually has a few extra copies floating around, so they could probably lend you one or give you one if you want to go visit them. A Dignified Life, the Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. We've written activity books, and then the one that's kind of highlighted on the right is our newest book, which is really intended more for professionals about how to design and create this kind of best friends program. So these are some resources. I have a website, bestfriendsapproach.com, and I am on Facebook. In fact, I'm actually streaming live tonight at around 2:30 West Coast time, 5:30 East Coast time, with the talk I'm giving for the Louisville, Kentucky Alzheimer's Association. And that will be on there pre-recorded later. And then I also am on Facebook. And if any of you are on Facebook, you can like the Best Friends Approach by typing Best Friends Approach, that little search engine on your phone or laptop. And I send out lots of regular announcements. Era Living has a website as well, eraliving.com, and they have lots of good material about the Best Friends Approach and about my work for them. So I encourage you to check out their website. And I don't think I put it on the PowerPoint here, but my email is very simple: davidtroxel@gmail.com. davidtroxel@gmail.com. So with that, I'm going to stop screen sharing. I want to thank you for many of you who've been on this whole journey with me of our 7-part series. And I think for once, I've actually left a little bit of time as opposed to where I run up to like 4 or 5 minutes. Are there any questions or comments you'd like to ask? Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. There are a few questions in the chat that I will ask you. First one is, should I be more of a listener than a talker? Does talking too much mean too much is getting communicated and too much to track?
Wow, what a good question. You know, I have to say, everything's a bit individualized. I think certainly you want to pause and slow down and listen, because sometimes if you do, the person will respond. I will say, though, when their language centers are damaged, if they are having trouble speaking, I think they enjoy us chit-chatting and visiting and telling stories. I think that's very entertaining and positive for them. So I don't know that I have one straightforward answer on that. But you probably do have to do more of the heavy lifting. You probably do have to do more of the initiating. You know, people with dementia lose that start button. So if you're just jabbering on and chit-chatting and talking about your day, I think that's okay. But maybe check in with them and how are you doing? Tell me more about your day. You know, how are you feeling? And leaving some time for them to respond.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, my loved one uses word salad, and I'm not sure what she means. How should I react to what she is saying? Should I mimic her emotions, such as when she laughs, should I also laugh?
I think the answer is yes. Yeah. I mean, really good insight there. You know, it is so sad how the language fails, vocabulary fails. You know, you want to kind of listen for that emotion underneath. Sometimes you can figure it out by the words they're saying, if they're a bit jumbled. But yeah, I think, you know, I don't think it's disrespectful to just sort of use your intuition. And if they're laughing, say that, you know, you really have a good sense of humor, Dad, and laughing too. If they're sad or kind of tearful, again, holding their hands, asking them what's wrong, being reassuring. And, you know, I believe in being authentic. Sometimes it's okay to say, you know, Dad, I'm so sorry, I'm not quite following you. I think you said this, or, you know, I'm so sorry, Dad, I'm not quite following you. But, you know, I'm here for you and we'll get it taken care of. We'll look into this, you know, I think that's okay too.
Okay. I have a question.
Sure.
An incident that happened last week, we were at shopping and we wanted to buy some crackers. So normally I would just take 1 box of crackers, and she wanted to get 3 boxes. Okay. So how do you handle a situation like that?
Okay, well, number one, I guess part of me would be okay getting 3 boxes, you know, and just saving them for later. If it were something unusual, you could always, I guess, buy them if the person were really determined and maybe take them back the next time. But, you know, a lot of it's your calmness. Like you might say, honey, you know, I know you want 3 boxes, my goodness. But, you know, I think we have a couple extra at home. Tell you what, let's get 1 box tonight. But I promise I'll come back tomorrow if we run short, you know? So sometimes they just listen to the tone of your voice and the reasoning and say, oh, that's a good idea. You know, I think you're right. Prices are going up these days. We might want to stock up, but, you know, I think we're okay at the moment. Let's just, you know, take the 1. So sometimes that can work. You don't want to get angry. You don't want to say, no, 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 or, you know, we can't do that. You know, you want to have that little finesse kind of as you're talking with them. So again, I guess option one is buy the 3 boxes of crackers, put them away for a rainy day. Number
Right.
two, let's say it's something that's, like expensive, take it back. And the third one might be just have a light touch as you kind of say, hey, maybe not today.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have one more question in the chat feature here. How can I tell my loved one is hearing or understanding what I'm saying to her?
Say that one more time. You broke up slightly for me.
How can I tell my loved one she is hearing or understanding what I am saying to her?
I'm so sorry you broke it. So let me see if I can rephrase. How can I tell my loved one that I don't understand what she's saying? Is that basically the question?
The question is, how can a person without dementia understand if the person with dementia is hearing them or understanding them?
So sorry. Got
That's
it.
all right.
Okay, so how can we know whether the person's really understanding what we're saying to them? Wow. Well, I guess truthfully, we may not always know, but sometimes we can see, like, if I'm trying to explain to my mother, hey, mom, gosh, your dentist appointment's tomorrow, not today. I know you're such a planner. I know you always get ahead of things, but we're good today. We're good. You can often sort of see them relax, look at their body language. They will sometimes respond, and you can often, kind of see whether you're getting through or not. But yeah, it's tough because, again, on a very serious note, this is not uncommon, but one of my friends, the father had died about 5-6 years ago. And they've explained to the mother that dad died. She was at the funeral, but she'll often say, where's dad? Or have you seen your father? Or what's he up to? So they do forget, even when sometimes you've explained and they really, should know what's that about. You're welcome to, I think if you push down on your space bar, you're welcome just to go ahead and ask a question directly. We're all kind of friends and family here. So I'm happy to have you, again, type in the chat box, or just like Joe did a minute ago, ask your questions.
Hi, this is Marcia.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi. Yeah, I am new to this. My father's transitioning probably over to memory care sometime in the next 6 months, but he's still really highly functioning cognitively. So I've missed this series, and I'm wondering how can I access it, because I really need it now.
We have good news for you, and I'll let our friends at Era Living share that with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so Marcia, I'm going to send you a message right now. We'll be able to email you the links for all of the other webinars that we've had up till now, and including this one.
Yay! Thank you.
Now it is $1 per class that you have to send to Sacramento, but otherwise, no. Yeah. I think Era Living is going to have them on their website eventually, or they will have them, but they've all been recorded as well. So happy to be supportive, and sounds like you're just starting out. Honestly, I do this all the time. You're also welcome to take a look at my family book, the Dignified Life, because it'll really be helpful for you. It's on Kindle and all that. And by the way, I get about 20 cents per book, so I do have a conflict of interest. But anyway, you're also welcome to email me anytime, davidtroxel@gmail.com, and be happy to answer your questions or set up a call with you. Other comments or questions, or even since some of you, I think, have been at all of the 7 webinars, if you have anything you'd like to share that you've learned from the classes, or any particular insights.
Oh, I have one more question, since I missed the series, so I hope it's not repetitive. My father recently lost his sweetheart of 7 years. They weren't married, but he was devoted to her. And he is alternating between remembering that she died and also has a story that she's moved away to go back to live with her family or be with her former boyfriend. And he's functioning highly enough that he understands completely when I tell him, but it also sends him back into acute grief. But I also, he's functioning highly enough that I feel uncomfortable trying to pretend that isn't, what's not going on. So I'm wondering if you have any counsel on that.
Boy, Marcia, really amazing, great question, and one that's not uncommon. So Here's just an idea or two that I have for you about this issue, about what do you do when someone asks, where's mother, and mother's died 20 years ago. So number one is, if you do tell them the truth, like, gee, Dad, isn't it something, your beautiful girlfriend, Julie, she passed away. She died about 3 months ago. And then you pause and say, Dad, didn't Julie make the best lemon meringue pie?
Mhm.
Or Dad, isn't it crazy that you both hit hole-in-ones on the golf course? Or, if you point out to something kind of playful and fun about something about her personality or life, what happens, I think, is sometimes you're acknowledging their loss, but you're almost kind of giving a little bit of a memory there of something positive. So even though your dad might cry or be upset for a minute or two, maybe you'll start talking about how she taught everybody in the family to make the best pie crust. So that's one idea. Second is, sometimes with my mother-in-law, who's in memory care now, and will ask about her husband, sometimes I just don't say anything. I just sort of let the moment go, and that can be okay. And other times I might say, well, tell me more about him, Joyce, remind me, how did you meet your husband? Or, did he ever cook? Was he a good cook? Or did he ever hit that hole on the golf course? And sometimes when you ask them to say, tell me more about them, it sort of allows them to kind of get it through their sort of catharsis. It makes things go a bit better. And then you might even say, I'm not really sure where Mary Jo is right now, but gosh, what a wonderful partner she's been to you. So I try, Marcia, and I think you kind of figured out this, I try not to overtly lie and be very grandiose, because they do remember sometimes. So, I've had family members say, oh, gosh, Mom, Dad must be at Walmart. He's shopping. Maybe he'll be here soon. Well, that's a kind of a treacherous approach, because they may remember. So I think a little bit of finesse that way. I do think telling them the truth or trying some of these other strategies might be helpful. But yeah, it's tough. And like I say, when my mother-in-law asks about him, sometimes, this sounds weird, but sometimes I'll shrug and just wait. And then maybe the moment passes.
Thank you. Thanks.
David, this is Jim Costello. My wife's at a pretty advanced stage of dementia, and the content of the garbled speech. That's all the time. I can't really get any direct understanding about what she says. But the one question is, when I do go in, I usually start, with the hugs and the kisses and the nice things, and telling her how good she looks and complimenting on her hair, things that were always important to, the way she kept herself. And then I'll generally comment on a few things of interest, like family, the economy, or whatever's going on. But I could tell her that, a tree fell through the house, and I'd get the same response. Does that mean she's not getting any of that, or possibly she is and just can't show a reaction like I would, perhaps? If she were the talker, I'd be responding and said, wow, no kidding. Oh, that's awful. There's none of that. But she just looks at me, and there's no telling is she hearing me? Is she absorbing any of that? Is it helpful, or should I not go that way?
Man, I wish I could give you the exact answer, because sometimes we just don't know, do we? But I kind of, honestly, I like what you're doing. I like what I'm hearing about, just, honey, this, and let me tell you about that, and this is new. And they do retain this emotional memory of you, and probably she loves the fact that you're there and chatting with her and talking. It could be that she's not comprehending. It also could be that her short-term memory is so bad that she just can't even, if you say to her, honey, a tree fell on the house, she might know that in that 1 minute, but then it's gone. So it's hard to know, but clearly, she may or may not be understanding you, may or may not be retaining. But I love what you're doing. I think keep it up, and it probably helps you feel like you're, connected to her. So no harm done, and maybe just some positives.
All right, thank you.
David, I have one more question here. The question is, basically, how should I know when a person should be moved to assisted living?
Okay. Assisted living or memory care, or all of the above?
Probably all of the above.
Okay. Well, I'll be brief, and I'm sure the Era Living people can do a better job of this than me. But basically, in retirement living, senior living, you have what they call independent living, where it's almost like you're renting an apartment somewhere. You know, there might be nice services and dining, but you're kind of on your own. Assisted living is where you need a little bit of help. Maybe you're 100% cognitively together, but you're a bit fragile. You need someone to help you, take a shower because you're maybe a fall risk, things like that. Memory care is, of course, when someone's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or another dementia or having really profound forgetfulness. And in memory care, I guess the 2 points of difference or 3 points of difference is staff have usually had some specialized training. Staff do a lot more cueing and encouraging. They knock on the doors. They say, "Oh, David, coffee talk's about to start. You love that. Come with me." So there's a lot more cueing and encouragement. And I would say maybe a couple other elements of memory care, safety. Normally they have what they call a secure door, delayed egress, so people can't wander. And then socialization. The best memory care neighborhoods really foster the sense of socialization and engagement. So I think safety and socialization are two key areas that I think are important for memory care, or even for AL. You could have all the money in the world, but if you're by yourself, even with a paid caregiver in the home, it's hard to create that social milieu or environment that's therapeutic. Another question or two. I don't mind running a little bit late if people have questions. Otherwise, again, you're welcome to email me at davidtroxel@gmail.com or talk to some of the other folks at Era Living who can get your questions to me.
I have another question. How can you tell, because like I said, the physical therapist and the occupational therapist who've been working with my father following surgeries say he is at a higher functioning than memory care. And I know it will progress likely. So how can you tell when it's time to go to memory care compared to, well, he's in assisted right now and with caregivers. How can you tell when that transition should happen?
Marcia, has he been formally diagnosed with the dementia?
He had a bunch of brain scans and stuff done by a neurologist last June who said by ruling out other dementia, it's probably Alzheimer's. I do have another neurology with a different neurologist appointment early October.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to tackle your question 2 different ways. I'm in California, and I will say there's some regulatory issues. If someone's had a formal diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, sometimes a company really needs to make a placement in memory care because they might have a lot of liability. Let's say your father were more active, it says Alzheimer's on his chart, and he wanders off in the middle of the night, people can be sued for that type of thing. So there's sometimes some regulatory issues, but in general, a company like Era Living, what I like about them and a good other companies who are progressive, they have a kind of holistic care plan, a holistic assessment. In my books, and Era Living practices this too, we believe that you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you kind of met one person with Alzheimer's. Everyone's a bit different. So they should assess your dad, look at his unique situation, his strengths, his deficits, and hopefully then determine the best level of care. It happens all the time that people are a little bit gray, and again, candidly, I'm a bit mixed. I mean, if you don't have regulatory issues, sometimes you try them in assisted living for a while and you see how it goes and just let the family know that this may need to change. But I also don't want you to wait till he's so impaired that he can't enjoy any of the activities in memory care or can't really be part of that community. So again, it's a bit qualitative versus quantitative, I guess I'd say, but ask the team to, a company like Era Living or any other kind of progressive company. Hopefully they get 3 or 4 people together, their social worker, their admissions person, their executive director, their nurse, and maybe even have a little care planning session as a group to really talk about what's best for your dad.
Thank you.
All right, so like David said, if you have questions, feel free to email him or you can email us here at Ida Culver House Broadview. You all got the link from Daniel, so you can reach out to him. If Marcia, like you said, you were gonna, we'll go ahead and email you those links for the other presentations. So I think we're right at time. So I just want to thank you again, David. This has been an amazing series. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge, and I think it is extremely helpful for a lot of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. And a special shout out to those of you who were with me for the whole series. I think you should get some kind of certificate. We'll have to work on that. You know, I survived the David Troxel 7-part series on dementia care. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all again for joining. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.